The data partnership is something that very key, especially in the world of AI that we are in. Data is not just data. People talk about data is the new oil, there's all these things. I think data is the new uranium. It's extremely dangerous to store. You don't want to touch it. And once the patient left the building, there's not much use for it. Unless you can refine that into something that is going to be powering the next generation of product, which is AI.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Healthtech Podcast. With me today, I have Dimitry Tran, and you may know him as the founder of, Harrison.ai, Franklin.ai, Annalise.ai. You could know him from lots of different things, but taking healthcare AI by storm, doing lots of incredible things, and globally for that matter. And we're going to get into a lot of that stuff today. So Dimitry, welcome to the Healthtech Podcast. How are you doing, sir?
Good to be with you, James.
So you're talking to us from Australia, I believe, evening time. So thank you for joining us all the way from Australia in the evening. Yeah, I imagine the weather's a lot better than it is here, but I'm not going to get you to explain that. I've just got back from honeymoon in the Seychelles, I was just telling you. So apologies to the listeners if I'm slow to get the engine going today, but I am going to make this as interesting as possible. It won't be difficult with the amount of stuff that you're doing, honestly. Really looking forward to getting into it. So the way that we start this podcast, Dimitry, is I get you to tell your story. Now, I'd love to get the long version of this. Obviously, you Vietnamese, I believe, and so your story starts there. But yeah, it'd be great to hear how you moved through finance into healthcare and mathematics with your father, I believe, and yeah, how that turns into deploying some of the world's greatest healthcare AI, dare I say it. But yeah, you tell me the long version, mate.
You're too kind. So the company was co-founded between my brother, Dr. Angus Tran, and I. And we both grew up in Vietnam in a family of two high school math teachers. So
oh wow,
it's actually pretty scary growing up because our dad wrote the national textbook for math. So we always were picked on by the teachers, the math teachers, to solve the hardest problem in every classroom. And whenever there's a hard problem, I say, yeah, your dad wrote a book, right? So it's actually quite a challenging childhood. But the upside of that is that we get exposure to computer pretty early. And we're very fortunate in that regard. We started from very humble means. High school teachers in Vietnam doesn't pay much, but one of our uncle is the nuclear physicist in France. And he sent our father one of the first computer in Vietnam, actually. I remember when he got it, he had to pay custom, and they don't know what it is, so they tax him as a TV because it looked like a TV. So that's how we got started in computer. And I remember when we was like 6-7 years old, my dad say, Dimitri, one day we will have something called AI, but for now we teach the computer to try to do like voice synthesization or translation. And he's a true pioneer. I remember he created software to teach math, and he coded that in Pascal, and then he sold that to people. So people actually come to our home. He advertised it on newspaper. People come to our home. He give them an envelope with the floppy disk inside, and he's selling it. So he has been selling software before, even came to Australia. So that was
wow.
We're certainly not the entrepreneur pioneer in our family because our father really incredible. We got sent to Australia, and I started in Australia in 2003, and went to high school here. And I absolutely want to become a doctor, and actually got the score to go to medical school as well. And then I realized that being an international student in Australia, it costs about $100,000 a year for 6 years. So it's about $600,000 to become a doctor. And that is not a kind of money that two high school teachers in Vietnam can afford. So I decided to do something a bit more sensible and faster. So I got into finance and accounting, but with a passion for healthcare nevertheless. So after I finished finance and accounting, I got a big fortune to work for a great man, Mr. Paul Ramsey, the founder of Ramsey Healthcare. So he So I met him when I was in uni, and I graduated top of my class. So my chancellor introduced me to Paul, and Paul said, "Dimitri, you're very book smart, clearly, but not street smart. How about you go and do something else first, and then I'll see how you go." So I went on and do strategy consulting for a couple of years. So doing your typical consulting, like what do I know? Like coming out of uni, telling people what to do as a consultant, but I think that's just how the industry works. So I did that for a couple of years, and eventually got a chance to work for Paul and learning from him. And by that time, he's already very successful. He already built the largest hospital group in Australia, 80-90 hospital in Australia. He already expanded to the UK. So Ramsay UK was still there, and then start expanding to Asia and Europe. So I got to see the business side of healthcare, not the clinical side of healthcare, but understanding how hospital is run, how new technologies was adopted.
Yeah.
I remember when, as a doctor, I'm sure when they start introducing robotic surgery, like the Da Vinci robot was brought into Australia, and there was a big buzz. And I was just like, oh, wow, this is amazing technology. It's really expensive. And what is the return on investment? And I have to do an Excel sheet to say, this is the return on investment of robotic surgery over traditional techniques. So yeah, that was really fascinating to try to understand the introduction of technology and healthcare. And I eventually become the head of innovation for Ramsay Healthcare and try to set up the innovation program. So I got my wish of getting into healthcare, but from a different direction. The difficult things is that doctors only listen to doctors. So
it's so true. It's so true, because no one else understands, Dimitri. No one else gets it. No one else understands us.
So it was a difficult job being a head innovation in healthcare, but not being a doctor. So around the same time, Angus, my brother, he came over for high school as well. And I can afford to send him to medical school now. I save up. So he got to go to medical school, and he's much smarter than I am, like in every way. So he went to medical school, and I started looking at some of the textbook that he's doing. He was doing the time and just like anatomy and all that. I said, that's not that hard. I could do it. So after 10 years in corporate life, I pick up the textbook. I'm gonna sit the GAMSAT. I'm gonna go to medical school. And then Angus said, "Hey, like, it's crazy. We don't need, both of us need to be doctors. We need to do something different." And at the time, Angus was really into AI. He was like, that was around, when AlphaGo, DeepMind, the whole like AI thing started going. And he went online, paid $50 on Coursera, and teach himself AI, because both him and I know how to code from being, from our family. So he taught himself coding, and he said, Dimitri, I train an AI that can distinguish between, YouTube videos. So it can classify whether people are playing basketball or people are playing, soccer. But then I recently attended a class where the teacher was teaching us to distinguish between embryos, like in IVF. What is the difference between a viable IVF embryo in developing in a test tube, and then in a tube, and then incubator, and then the one that is not viable? I want to train an AI to do that. I say, like, okay, you need a lot of data. I know a lot of people in healthcare. Let me see if I can find you some data. So I went to a friend of mine who's was the CEO of Virtus Health, which is the largest IVF group in the world. She actually 1 block away from my office. She used to work at Ramsay Healthcare before as well. So I just said, hey, Sue Channon was her name. And hey, Sue, my brother has this incredible idea. I don't know if it's going to work or not. How about we go 50-50? Yeah. If he invented something that works, then, we split it half. And she's like, to her credit, she's like, okay, let's give it a try. And back then, no one knew about AI. This is like, 8 years ago. So Angus gave it a try. He built an AI, and that technology went on to be published in a top medical journal. And within 6 months, it showed that it significantly increased pregnancy rate, because the AI is very good at selecting the best embryo. So that technology then got acquired by a listed company in Europe called Vitrolife within about 6 months after that. So even before medical school, finishing medical school, Angus already inventor.
Sold a company.
And sold a company. And that's how we say, oh, wow, this is amazing. This technology can really transform lives. And within that year, like that technology created like hundreds of babies more than the year before, because the AI selected better IVF embryo and shortened the treatment cycle for people going through fertility treatment.
That's quite just to jump into it, like that's quite a feat for two young men, just to have made an impact on the world, going from Coursera teaching yourself AI to then going, is this video basketball or not? And going, well, hold on, that can be the same as embryos. And then all of a sudden you've built, obviously we're shortening this story massively. There's probably lots of hard work and hardships and startup nonsense that everyone has to go through in that. And so it does sound a lot easier than I'm sure it was, but that is still a relatively quick thing to have done. And then to have achieved not only selling a company, but making that sort of impact on the world, on people's lives, knowing that there's humans in the world that perhaps wouldn't have been before this technology. Like, that's quite a lot for two young heads on two young shoulders. Or it's incredibly inspiring for two incredibly ambitious heads on shoulders, which is, I guess, the route it has gone down. But yeah, I don't want to skip. I just wanted to highlight that. I think that's a heck of an achievement for two young guys to do that and to create that impact on the world. It just shows what technology can do in the right hands, right?
Yeah, thanks, James. I think it is a very fortunate situation because Angus are obviously incredible from medical and technology side, but also having spent 10 years in healthcare innovation, I know the value of getting access to the data, how to negotiate the term sheets, how to get an exit. So I think it's just having the two ingredients at the right time enables something like that to happen. But it was incredibly fast. It was in a matter of 24 months end to end. So
really,
wow. It really inspires, like exactly like you said, because with technology you can impact so much more. And Angus, at the time, he's still going through his USMLE exam, and he would just went back to Vietnam for internship and to go to hospital, and he just really, I think he almost despair, because he's saying like he wants to become a cardiologist. His dream is become a cardiothoracic surgeon, and he's saying, even if I'm the best cardiothoracic surgeon there is, and I go back to Vietnam and practice, and maximum I'm going to impact 100, 200 lives a year. Like that is best case scenario. Multiply that over a career of 50 years. He wants to do something that is more impactful. And then we know technology can have that impact. So to have hundreds of couples within a year to have a child, that is just so meaningful.
It must be so hard to see the world the same way after doing that. Like, so hard to see a career the same way as you've identified. But yeah, I think is it the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility? I think it's that as well, that you're like, hey, well, actually, us as a pair, we can do this. Therefore, should we? Is it an ethical question? If I don't do this, if I go and become a cardiologist and impact 200 lives, do I then question myself of, could I have done more? I think it's a really interesting one, actually. I think that for people with that sort of moral and ethical framework and people that think about that sort of stuff, which obviously you do, I think it's a really interesting one.
Just to pick on that one, like one of our company value, actually a rehash of that, which is with great responsibility comes great opportunity. Because now we have the opportunity to do something that it was unable to achieve before. And having spent my whole career in healthcare, like I have best friends who are surgeons, and they're the smartest and the best people that you would know. At the most, like you work with them, they are under intense pressure to do something so intricate and life changing. And that's why I always even maybe 3 startups later, I will eventually go to medical school, because I'm just really drawn, by the challenge, the intellectual challenge, the technical challenge of being in medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Put a story back on track. I remember we were in a conference in Colorado, an IVF conference where Angus come and present his innovation. And at the time, this gold standard for selecting embryo is a thing called Gardner score. So Professor Gardner invented the scoring system. And then he was going to be on stage with Angus presenting that is AI will now creating a scoring system. So it is almost a paradigm shifting presentation. And then they need to put his name on the paper. And obviously, all the professors and doctors have a lot of acronyms behind their name. Angus haven't finished medical school yet. So we put HSC, high school certificate, behind his last name, because that's the only degree that he actually attained at that time. So that was...
That's so funny. I can honestly, I can picture this because like I've obviously been to these conferences and actually it becomes a flex, doesn't it? Of like more letters after my name than in it kind of thing. And like everyone, they, love to put, we all did it. And we love to put those things. I was like BMBS, BMed Sci, PG this, like I had loads of stuff. And then I could just imagine like single name just comes afterwards. Like, yep, I've changed the world.
But I think that's really a moment of a big revelation for me and Angus is that we now have the responsibility to do something bigger, and we chose to work in radiology and pathology because, as you know, computer vision is the most advanced area of AI, and it still is most mature area. Of course, there's other interesting things that we can talk about like generative AI, but computer vision has been around for a long time and very mature. So we say, okay, we work in IVF. Now let's see if we can do the same in X-ray, in CTs, in pathology slides. So that's where the journey started. We didn't know how hard it's going to be. We thought that, hey, it's going to be similar playbook, transformers in and out. And now 5 years later, it's actually much harder, I think, because in something like IVF and an embryo, you have a very standardized bit of information, which is image of an embryo developing over 5 days. And it's a binary outcome, isn't it? It's like pregnancy or no pregnancy. It's like fetal heart rate or no. Whereas in a chest x-ray, there's like 120 things that a radiologist or a clinician need to look at. And it could be rift fractures, lung nodule, free gas, it's just so many things. So it's actually a much bigger technology challenge, but that's where the fun is.
And well, yes, the challenge and the fun. It's an incredible story, man. Like what a journey you've been on, honestly. The one thing that I actually want to talk to you about is because I think this plays probably the biggest part in everything you've done so far is this relationship that you have with your brother, actually, and the complementary skill. You two basically define complementary skills, and I think that's really interesting because I think you talked about in your journey being able to see the business side of healthcare, head of innovation for Ramsay Healthcare. I think that's a really interesting title as well, because there's no single definition of head of innovation. I think heads of innovation will do very different things in very different places. But I think what they'll probably agree on is that, or what they'll have in common, heads of innovation, is that they will know how to solve the complex problems of that system in order to innovate. So they will be they'll have high IQ, they'll have high EQ, they'll understand corporate politics, they'll understand finance, they'll understand lots of different things, because that's how you innovate. You've got to understand the complexity of a system, and you've got to understand the complexity of people, and then you've got to go and get things done. So actually, I think a head of innovation role is super, super, super interesting. But I want to hear it from you, actually, of like your side of that, and in your head of innovation role, and what you define as like what makes you valuable in that pairing. What are those skills? What do you think is what are those skills? How do you define that? What is the understanding of the business side of healthcare? Is it finance? Is it knowing how money moves and where it moves? Is it knowing who is where and does what? Is it knowing the structure of the system? Is it more skill based than that rather than knowledge? Like you tell me, like what has been the value of your journey thus far, and in order to innovate in healthcare?
Yeah, I think innovation in healthcare is incredibly difficult. You're saying that you need to change the status quo or die trying. And I would say that most head of innovation, including myself, probably don't last very long in most organizations.
Yeah.
Because this is an incredible difficult job, right? You don't have a very clear KPI, and changing any organization is hard. Changing healthcare is, difficult. And it was not a joke, right? To say that doctors don't listen to anyone else but doctors. It just, and rightly so, of course. This is very complex decision, very high stakes situation.
Agreed.
I have a dislike for the word disruption, right? Because it's just like you cannot disrupt healthcare. This is not an industry where disruption should be used as a word, because people died if there's disruption in healthcare. So I think I have a healthy respect for the healthcare system on how complex it is, why the rules and the guardrail are there, and why things move slowly, because we're dealing with high stakes situation. But then I think at the same time, you need to deliver results, right? You need to understand how to get the resources, being capital or the people required to get a project off the ground, and what is the return on investment. Even though everyone talk about patient outcome, every procurement was made based on an ROI calculator somewhere. There's an Excel sheet in an NHS trust or in an Australian hospital that say, I buy this and I get that, right? It is quite jarring when you say patient life, money, but at the same time, those things have to come together. So I think that's part of part of the understanding of the healthcare system from a business side. At the same time, I think people in healthcare are just incredible. Like, they are the smartest people that you would see, because that's what it takes to work in healthcare. So over the last 5 years, I would say that Angus evolved to become even better than me in business side, because I always say it's easier for a doctor to become a businessman than a businessman to become a doctor, right? So it is for someone, it's not hard to pick up what I do. So I'm trying to fill in the gaps in the organization. Right now, I'm in charge of the finance team. So I work with the finance team on capital raise, as well as doing business development, essentially bringing our product to market. But at the same time, I don't think that I'm selling anything, because we already established that doctors don't listen to me. So it is really about setting up the key opinion leaders, right? The reference side, trying to get someone to try it. Because if they try it and they like it and they see the value from it, then they will tell their friends. And that is how anything in healthcare kind of work. So that's how I look at healthcare, is that this is fascinating. This is the most difficult thing in the world to do. And I wouldn't work anywhere else.
So you got to the point in the story where you're moving from IVF to X-rays and CTs. It's a more complex problem. It's going to be a bigger lift from lots of different things, intellectually, with team, with probably raising money to set things up and do all sorts. But I guess and you have the confidence from an exit, a product that worked. You're sort of riding the wave here of the responsibility and the opportunity, to quote your company value. So what, very, very, very practically, what comes next here? What do you actually do? Thinking, hold on a minute, we can now apply this to something way bigger, make way more impact. What do you actually do?
This is very interesting. We went to the largest radiology conference in the world. That's what we did. So we said, if we want to participate and contribute to this domain, we need to know what it looked like. And last minute, we flew to, it's just a month after that, after the decision, there was the RSNA, Radiology Society of North America conference in Chicago. Man, it's a big conference. This is amazing. Hundreds of thousands of people, big giant MRI machines, CT machines. The hall is huge. I never seen anything like that in my life. And that is the year where they first having a dedicated area for AI companies. And I went and literally there's 100 AI company in radiology. And Angus and I look at myself and say, what are we doing here? It's already fully penetrated. There's already AI here. We should pick something else to do. Maybe it's not too late to return the money to the investor. We don't need to do this. It's already solved. It's we're already here. So let's look around and see what people have built. So what we see is a wall-to-wall narrow AI solutions. There's an AI for detecting pneumothorax on chest X-ray. And the next booth would be an AI for lung nodule on chest CT. And the next booth would be PE detection. And then the next booth is a large vessel occlusion on CT angiogram. And when we were traveling with one of our friends who's a radiologist, and I asked him, how many of these do you need to buy to actually work to complete a workday? And there are hundreds of them. And he said, even if I buy every single one of these, I still not going to have enough. This is like...
Doesn't actually solve the problem, yeah.
This is like having a company selling a spell checker for letter A, and the next booth selling a spell checker for letter B and letter D, and no one selling A to Z. That is what happened. This is in 2019, I think. And we say, okay, maybe there's an idea here, right? So if we going to have a business in this, actually make a contribution, we need to try to build something that is complete, A to Z. So we sit down with our friends who is a radiologist and say, write me down what you actually look at when you look at chest X-ray. You said that you only take like a minute to look at a chest X-ray. What going through your brain? Like, let's Wizard of Oz this. And it took him a few hours because the first 10 is easy, right? But then like the next one, oh, there's that one. Oh, there's that one. There's that one. Eventually, he completed a list of about 120 things. And he said, okay, this is what I look at when I look at a chest X-ray. Because it's not just a lung nodule, right? Is it cavitating? Is it a calcified nodule, right? They're just all the subtype of things that you look at as well, not just the headline.
Yes.
And he say, I also look, it is a nipple shadow. Because the nipple shadow on a chest X-ray casts an image on a lung that sometimes look like a nodule. But it is opaque, it's round, right? It's on your lung. So all these edge case that you need to think about to build an A to Z solution. That's why no one be able to do that yet. So that's number one.
Yeah.
And then number two, you need to require a huge amount of data because each of those things require tens of thousands of data points of nipple shadow or of cavitating lung nodule or of rib fractures on the third rib. The AI need to learn from examples. We know that. We just train an AI in IVF, but only for one thing, which is pregnancy or no pregnancy, right? This time we need to train an AI that detect 120 things. And each of them require tens of thousands of data points. So we say, okay, we need to really big data set. That is what we think practically that's what's required. So we say we need to go and partner with someone who have a lot of data. That's just the right answer. So we went and chose to work with IMED Radiology, which is the largest radiology provider in Australia, which also happened to be the second largest in the world. So they have about 300 clinics around Australia, about 300 radiologists as well. So we've been working with them now for 5 years, but about 18 months after we partnered with them, we finished the product development. We managed to build the thing that everyone say couldn't be built, which is an AI that detects 124 findings on chest X-ray.
Wow.
And that was a moment for us to say, we finally cracked it. We finally built an A to Z solution that people are asking for. But that's only the first step because I listened to many of your podcasts. Building something in research is different, right? Just because you say it's good doesn't mean that people believe it's good. So you need to then go through regulatory approval. So we need to run a giant study. So we say, okay, no one going to believe that we have done it. We need to publish on Lancet, right? We need to publish on, one of the top medical journal. So we aim for Lancet Digital Health Journal, which is a top in our field. But then we need to do a study with N equal probably around 100,000 for this to be able to power these many findings. So it is, okay, we build a really big product. Let's now run the biggest study ever been run in radiology, not just radiology AI, but in radiology. And we went and do that as well. So eventually we ran that study, took about 12 months, and then we released the product in 2021, I think. And we got CE mark +2 approval. And that's, I guess the rest is history because we're now carrying 6 million patients a year. So the product is now approved in 40 countries, currently live in 10 countries. And just last week, we got the news that we've been selected to supply as an AI of choice for a third of NHS England, so about 3 million patients a year, which is a great responsibility. To quote you before, it is an enormous responsibility. But then our technology has been live in Australia for a third of radiologists for 2 years now with great outcomes. So we know that it's going to work and it's going to work well, but every healthcare system is different. Integration going to be different, deployment going to be different, change management going to be different. So all of that is in front of us, but it's pretty exciting to be able to have that scale impact, but also, greater responsibility.
It is exciting. It is exciting. And congratulations, man. It's a heck of an achievement. I have a few questions on this. The first thing you talked about, right? What enabled so much of this? Actually, let me go back even a stage further. I love the fact that the first thing that you did was go to that conference, because this is one of the reasons why doctors only listen to doctors, right? Because they feel like no one understands them, because no one listens to us. You listened first. You went to, you didn't just go out saying like, oh, here's who we are, here's what our product's going to be, it's amazing, let's get loads of customers, blah, blah. You actually just went to a conference and just listened and looked and like, what else is going on here? And like, you probably had a lot of conversations with people and actually listened to what they actually had to say. And you were, collecting data and just being a bit humble to begin with. I think that's so important. You talk about healthcare innovation, you talk about one of the difficulties of healthcare innovation, you talk about why things are so difficult to adopt. Yeah, it's because people feel so often like things just imposed on them. Things just land in the ward because someone's made a decision that's above them. And like now they've got to do this new thing in this new system and they've got to learn it. And it's so innovative and it's going to change everything. But it takes an absolute year to learn, or like creates loads more work for this reason. And if they just asked us, we could have actually just told them this. That's such a common feeling. So I love the fact that you listened first. And I really want to highlight that as something that just as a principle of people trying to innovate, I think it's so important that people actually just go and do this. So I love that. The second thing is that what enabled this was that data partnership. As soon as you got the data partnership, you got the data to train the model, you train the model, you can start to make impact. All of that sits on that single agreement with, the biggest, the most amount of data in the country through this one door. You do everything you can to get through this door. However much you're comfortable sharing on this, I'm super interested in what that partnership looks like. What's your sell to them? How do you actually make that work? How do you structure that? How do you make that viable as a deal? Because this is the key to, I think, so much good innovation is the link between where the data sits currently in these, private clinic groups or in these big health systems, and then the innovation and the startups. We talk about sandboxing, we talk about lots of different ways of this working, but that's a deal that's just enabled all this innovation downstream. So what can you tell me about that deal and how you did it?
The data partnership is something that very key, especially in the world of AI that we are in. I think the first step is to understand how hard it is to begin with. Because if you're coming in not appreciating it, then you're not coming in with the right preparation. So data is not just data. And from our experience, I was responsible for data before when I worked in Ramsey Healthcare. And then when we work with Virtus in building AI in IVF, we need to work with data as well. And all these data are highly protected for the right reason, right? So you need to have the right guardrail, the right compliance. So the first employee that we hired was actually a lawyer, because we're saying that we need to go into this meeting with all the compliance done. So the first step to come in is to say, hey, we have done this before, right? We have done this in IVF. Look, there was a financial transaction. You can look at it. You can background check us. So this is not us saying that we will do something big. We actually have done it. So that we have that going for us. But the second step is, this is going to be the multi-step process where we seek ethics approval, where we do anonymization, where we get the right patient consent, doctor consent. This is how we're going to anonymize the data, how we're going to audit that we have done it properly. So all these steps was agreed upfront before any data will start flowing, right? I think that is the key, is to be really prepared on what you're working with. People talk about data is the new oil, there's all these things. I think healthcare data, I think data is the new uranium. It's extremely dangerous to store. You don't want to touch it. It's a liability for most healthcare organizations, right? Because it has huge risk, and you can't use it for many things. And once the patient left the building, there's not much use for it, unless you can refine that into something that is going to be powering the next generation of product, which is AI. So I think that is the journey that we went through, is that having worked in healthcare system for a decade, having build AI and deploy AI using data before, we came in quite prepared. And because of that, we managed to convince our partner to come with us on the journey. And great credit to them, right? Because at the time, 3-4 years ago, this is not a thing. Right now, it is a lot more common for people to talk about sandbox, data exchange, privacy, anonymization. Back then, an all new concept for an executive team to wrap their head around. But I think we got there, and because of that, it enabled the development of the product that we have today.
Yeah. It's about empathy, isn't it? You put yourself in their shoes, and it's a really, really interesting frame that data is not the new oil, data is the new uranium, or healthcare data is the new uranium. I think that's such an important frame of mind to be in that deal, because actually then the respect that you have for how they perceive the data and how much they are going to want to keep that data safe, and the potential power of that data. It's a really interesting frame. So other than the data partnership, the other thing that interested me was the A to Z concept. The question that I have is, how much does the point and shoot solutions that you saw at that radiology conference, how much does that relate to perhaps the regulatory constraints at that time, like intended use and intended use statements? AI can't be everything to everyone. You can't have the all-encompassing AI, because you can't really get that regulated because it doesn't have a clear intended use. So how do you then get a CE marked, class 2 device being so many things? I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, I think this is one of the other principles that we have, a value that we have as a company, is that you can overcome a lot of things if you be creative about it, and not just taking something as given, and actually thinking from first principle. There was a perception in the market that the narrow solution, like you say, was because of the intended use is narrow, because the regulators.
Yeah, I can remember this.
The regulators. But then if you actually go and read all the guideline document, none of it was saying that you cannot clear it. They just say that you need an enormous amount of data and evidence. You need to run a giant clinical study if you want to get something big through. So that brings us to the second person who joined us on the journey. His name is Stephen Ruffles. He's the CEO of our Franklin Pathology venture at the moment. But at the time, he joined us as our head of engineering and product development. He spent about 18 years at ResMed, which is a CPAP device machine and also ventilators. So when I met him at a startup event, I saying like, you build class 3 device, right? Ventilators. Like I'm just trying to get a class 2 device through. Can you give me some like advice? Like, you know these things. And he just looked at it and he said, Dimitry, the law doesn't prevent you from doing it. You just need to do it at a significant scale. And that looked very interesting. How about let me join you? I said, like, you have a really big job, like in a big company. He said, I want to be on this journey. And 5 years later, he's still here and he's leading our pathology AI, which we're going to get to. But I think having the right people to think from first principle, meaning that you can achieve things that, and just don't take as whatever is as given, and try to do things in slightly still the right way, not trying to shortcut anything. But if you're willing to do the hard work, I think you can get something big through the regulators.
It's arguably what true innovation actually is, isn't it? Is innovators and being entrepreneurial. And you think of anyone, if the word entrepreneurship makes you think of people, those people have rarely stuck to the status quo, have they? What was it they say? They've never built a statue of a conformist. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But the concept applies here at least. All of that obviously has to be then. It sits heavily on evidence, doesn't it? And evidence being such a big factor. What I liked about when you talked about evidence is when you talked about like, what's the highest impact factor journal? The Lancet. Right, let's go and get the Lancet. And it's like you actually set the bar really high. And I think that is another interesting concept for me. And I think that comes out in sort of, I guess, the success and the scale that you've had really is that I see and hear of a lot of companies that are just trying to get around the regulators. They're just trying to get something through. They're trying to do the minimum. They're trying to just get some academic thing somewhere. Just stick a 20 patient study in the Journal of Basket Weaving and it'll be fine. Like that, that sort of stuff. Like it seems that you really take this responsibility thing of like, actually, if we're going to do this at this scale, it needs to be the Lancet, it needs to be the New England Journal, it needs to be, JAMA, it needs to be like whatever it is. But it's interesting that you sort of aim for that because I guess it frames the standards that you have for the company, right? It talks to that a bit more. What was that evidence generation journey like? Did you find that relatively straightforward? Was it expensive? Did you wish that you'd maybe set your sights a bit lower in terms of impact factor? Or I imagine you're pleased now that it's all gone through and you've got your class 2. But any reflections on that evidence part?
I must admit, like working, as you know, through top maker journal, the review process is very long, and there was moment where it's like maybe we should have aim a bit lower because now it's been 6 months. We're waiting after 3 rounds of review, and they still haven't.
Yeah, the cash is going down. Yeah,
but I think it's come back to something that Angus and I believe strongly is that like you said, you cannot go around this. You need to go to face it heads on. And I'm gonna say something more controversial in the startup land, which is, I think the lean startup concept does not apply in healthcare. In particular, AI healthcare. The reason for that is that it's so expensive to build an AI. It's so expensive to go through clinical studies, to go through regulators, that you cannot incrementally add to your product. This is not the industry where I build a pacemaker that works 50% of the time and it will get better, and 5 years later it's going to work 99% of the time, right? This is an industry where you need to come in and need to be 99% on day one. So if you're coming in with a lean mindset and say, if I run a 20 people studies and publish in something not impactful, I may not have another shot. This may be all I'm going to have. So knowing that upfront, we have brought alongside investors who know that this is going to be a long journey, who are deep tech investors who have seen this playing out, who are not saying, hey, Dimitry, why are you doing this in such a big way? Maybe we start smaller, because you're not going to get there. And the only thing that we all have the same is time. And we don't want to waste everyone's time just to do something that is half step, instead where we can just take the industry to A to Z. And I think that was a controversial concept, like even with our partner at the time, that they say, we presented the plan to tackle 124 indication in chest X-ray, and the board approved. But after we already got the publication and product is released, they told us that they actually have a meeting afterward and say, if we got 10, that would be a phenomenal. So that is I think having the right mindset upfront is really important.
I'm curious, you mentioned investors there. What was the investment journey like for you? Because I imagine, having come from finance, having done things on that side of the world, you're very familiar with ROI and profit and these types of terms. In healthcare, often we don't like talking about these things. Where you've had this sort of career where you've blended the healthcare and the finance throughout, really. And I imagine you may have a few connections in that world and that kind of thing. So give me your reflections on your investment journey. How difficult was it? How easy was it? And what were you thinking when you were getting these investors on board? Because as you say, one of the things is you wanted patient capital, and patient meaning that you can withstand a long time rather than patients themselves. But yeah, what would be your reflections on or learning points even on your investment journey?
Yeah, I think having the right investors is very important. And we're very lucky that because we already have one exit before we started the company, we get to be more selective and get the time. Because Angus and I can afford to pay the startup team, so we don't have to go through the seed round, and we actually go straight to the Series A. Because then we get
interesting. That's really interesting.
A little bit more. So instead of taking the money and go to the beach, we say let's actually put it back ourselves and put the money where our mouth is, and actually started this thing and fund this thing to get off the ground. So when the investor come in, we were very lucky. I think it is both being selective, but also being lucky of having amazing investor like Blackbird Ventures, the largest VC in Australia. We have Horizon Ventures, who the backer of DeepMind, Siri, Waze. So they really know the AI. Having incredible investor like that mean that we get to learn a lot from them as well, right? Because the biggest team that I managed before starting the company was 3 people. We now have 300 people. So obviously, the different scale, the regulations are very different country to country. So I think having the right investor on the journey, meaning that they know that the impact going to be there. There's over 1 billion jet X-ray done annually around the world. It's never going to be a question of do we have enough market to go after. The question is, can we build a product that actually going to work and actually going to make an impact? So our very first customer in the UK was NHS Grampian in Aberdeen. And we worked with them to deploy our AI. And in the first day of deployment, they see the impact where the AI caught a lung nodule that the clinicians otherwise would not have picked it up. And that was day one. And now if you fast forward 2 years later, tens of thousands of patients has gone through the system. And they just published in the European Congress of Radiology, where they see a pickup in lung cancer stage 1 and a reduction in lung cancer stage 4. Because the AI allowed them to see much earlier in chest X-ray. And they talk about 600 lives could potentially save every year in Scotland because of this technology. So going end to end, from deployment to longitudinal outcome-based after 2 years, I think that is really rewarding for us to see. But also for our investor to see that it was the right thing to back an A to Z solution, a comprehensive solution, rather than just focusing on one thing, a small thing. So, we were incredibly fortunate to be able to have our first success with IVF in a small way. But now on this journey, it's a great responsibility to care for this many patients, millions of patients a year. But at the same time, the template has been created. We now have the manufacturing plan, because I think your question before was how could we build 124 indications where the whole industry combined is like 30? And the answer is that we never build each of those things separately. We build a factory to build AI as medical device. And that has always been our philosophy, is that just X-ray, incredible, build A to Z, all findings. But that's not enough. That's only about 20-30% of the workload of any hospital. There's CT brain, there's CT chest, mammography, there's all bone X-ray. So we are now in a journey to build the rest of the product portfolio. So we finished our CT brain product last year, 130 findings on CT brain, and this is now being launched globally as well. And we are building our next product, which is CT chest. So that is what Annalise is. Annalise's goal is to support clinicians in all of the major radiology volume.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, mate, that I think you can tell a lot about someone by their actions. And it's interesting to me, and I'm sure it'll be interesting to the investors, when you didn't do a seed round, you put your own capital at risk to do your own seed round. You put that skin in the game. And yes, you had a previous exit, you had your background, your complementary skills, your track record, you had all this stuff as well. but you actually had skin in the game. I've actually not heard of this very often, especially not at this kind of level for a tech company, like sticking that much skin in the game. I think people talk about how easy it is to raise second time round because the investors know that you can build a company. They know you can build it to exit, and actually, they're just less willing to put their own capital at risk because, hey, why should they? They're still going to do well out of the exit either way and all the rest of it. But the fact that you put, so much skin in the game early, like that must have shown, I mean, you tell me, like in those investor meetings, that must have been like a huge deal, like deal breaker of like, hold on a minute, these guys, they believe in it so much, they're already putting their money in. This isn't a punt. This is almost like they think it's a sure thing. So yeah, that must have counted for a lot.
I think the investors that we work with, they are not optimizing for the short term, right? So they're not worrying about, if it's going to be a few $1 million going to make a big difference for them, because they know that this is to build this kind of technologies. It's just, if you compare a medical device, how much money it would take to bring a pacemaker to the market? It would be close to $1 billion, right? To get it through regulators to approve, okay, that is a class 3 device.
Yeah.
Class 2 device is in the hundreds of $1 million range to take a product like that to market. So for them, I think the thing that impressed them is about the vision of creating something that is really different in the market, of trying to go from A to Z. And certainly there's people who say it could not be done and they didn't join us on the journey. But there are people who say, okay, let's try. And I think we are grateful for people who have been on this journey for 5 years and continue to support us on achieving this goal. I think healthcare is something easier to believe in, right? I think working in healthcare, everyone have a story of people in their lives or themselves that going through healthcare journey. So I think for investor, they already want to believe, they already want to support you because you're doing something that is bigger than yourself. So I think we're very lucky in that sense. One of my great moment that I truly reflect on was last year. Angus and I got a chance to go back to Vietnam, and there's a remote island in our city. It's about 2 hours by boat. And the World Bank 10 years ago went there and built a clinic. So they fund a clinic with a couple of beds, an X-ray machine, basic things. And the government job, as part of that agreement with the World Bank, is to send a doctor there to work. The problem there is whenever they send a doctor there, the doctor quit and said, you exile me to an island. I'm not going to stay in the island. I'm going to go and work in the private sector. And I wouldn't blame them, right? Because they have to exile themselves and their family to an island to provide medical care. So the only person who they managed to keep there is a nurse practitioner. But then the nurse practitioner don't know how to read X-ray. So Angus and I got a chance to donate an X-ray machine together with our AI technologies. And in the first few days, we screened for tuberculosis, for lung cancer, for things that if you can find it early, you can treat, right? You can do something about it. And I think the power of AI is not just in Aberdeen or in Manchester or in Sydney, where I live today, but also in remote places like that. And I think because the technology costs hundreds of millions to build, but once you build it, it is software. It's highly scalable. It doesn't cost anywhere, even 1 cent to run it because it's electricity, right? So it is. It's a wonderful technology of our time to finally scale the part that is not scalable, which are people like yourself. It takes 15, 20 years to train someone to have that level of skill, and to have them sitting behind computers is madness, in my view. They need to do intervention. They need to do complex things, right? Running MDT, doing things that is difficult, being Sherlock Holmes, not just look at screen and find black and white dot. I think that is where AI technology can really, really help.
Yeah, freeing people up to be human and put the human back in healthcare, like all these things. Yeah, no, totally. Emancipate people from the admin. I think you ask 99% of clinicians and that's what they want. I don't think many of them want to be, behind the screen. Or certainly I think a lot of people can agree that's not where humans are best placed in the healthcare system, where we're paying humans to do that when it might not be that necessary now or in the near future. I want to talk to you about the relationship between Annalise, Harrison, Franklin, 3 companies, 3 products, three different things going on. What are they and how do they relate to everything that we've been talking about?
The way you think about it is Harrison is a factory, and Alice and Franklin are the products of that factory. So we know that we need to form partnerships for data in radiology, and that was done with IMED Radiology. And then we went and we actually go and supply our AI to a company in Australia called Sonic. They also do radiology, but then they actually happen to be the world's largest pathology company that also happen to do radiology. So they say, like, we love your product in radiology, chest X-ray and CT brain. Can we partner with you to do something similar in pathology? So that was when Franklin was created, is to do the same thing, computer vision, but not on X-ray, but on histopathology slides.
Yeah.
And again, this is another level of technology leap because the image size is huge. You have the zoom factor, so you have a gigapixel image instead of a 1024 by 1024 pixel for just X-ray. You have something that is as big as a Google map of Sydney City, right? And you need to find like collision scoring and like a clump of cell, which is like cars in the city. It is a really difficult job. So we've been working together with our partner to build AI first in the field of prostate histopathology. And so we're very close to release that first product. And I think that's, again, is an opportunity for us to participate in creating the capacity of diagnostic that doesn't exist anywhere. If you look at radiology, the recommended number is 135 radiologists for a million people. Australia have about 80. The UK have around 60. So you have half the needed number. And last week I was in Indonesia. They have 6 radiologists for a million people. This is the world that we live in. This is why even in Sydney, a hospital in Sydney currently have 50,000 cases backlog of radiology in Metro Sydney. I would never imagine that happening when I started the company, that a place that is a high-income country like Australia or the UK are going to be in such difficult situation because you have a tsunami of patients coming back for screening for medical care after COVID. And the doctors are so burnt out from all of the hard work and pressure of COVID. So I think with our technology, we're all going to be in big trouble.
With the recent sort of boom in large language models, have you noticed people being more receptive, less receptive? Are the phones ringing a bit more for you? I know that large language models is not obviously what you do, but people can often conflate the two, especially under the broad umbrella of AI. I was just wondering, like, do you find the phones ringing a bit more now that the average person, perhaps the average clinician or the average, hospital, any healthcare professional or indeed manager might know a bit more about AI than normal? Like, what's this boom been like for you?
I think the boom has been more on the consumer, the patients, and on the clinician side. When we started in IVF and in radiology, the radiologists may or may not have heard of AI. It is a really foreign concept. But now the patients are asking, are you using AI? And the radiologist is like, I use AI to unlock my phone, to drag my email. How come I look at things manually every day to detect cancer? So I think the expectation from the patient and from the clinicians are very different now. The question is not why.
That's really interesting, man. Sorry to jump in. But like that's really interesting in exactly what you just said, because people are this has never happened before, by the way, that people are starting to place the machine above the human in terms of potential quality. And that might not be everywhere, and that might not be for everything. But it's interesting to me that people, the general public, from what you're saying, and patients are now starting to come round to the fact that AI plus human is better than human. That's really interesting. That's a really interesting shift when you consider like bottom up demand and the swell of like expectation from the patient side. That's really interesting.
I think that's we use AI every day, like thousands of times, right, for various things in our life. So it's only logical that we expect the same thing in healthcare. We did a survey recently, and we asked exactly the question: is that how comfortable you are for having AI involved in your care? And the most common feedback, open feedback that we have is, I thought AI already involved in my care. So it is a surprise that AI is not already being so widely used.
Wow.
Because if you think about healthcare, right, you go into a very advanced room with advanced machines scanning you, you would expect futuristic Star Trek-like technology.
So true.
Yet it's a human behind the screen looking at it with no support. That is just jarring for the consumer.
God,
right?
Yeah,
so it's the last year, certainly we see a huge inflection point in adoption coming from many ways. The shortage of clinicians become even more acute. The patient expectation is driving the adoption. But also, I think the third thing is the maturity of technology. None of this is possible if technology don't deliver on its promise, right? If the AI is just like 5%, 10%. But now what we're seeing is that AI can truly do transformation. And we are not just computer vision, we also work in large language model. But what we're guided by a motto, which is hallucination equal litigation in healthcare. Right? You cannot afford to have things that is 80% right. And that start making up that someone have cancer. Right? That is unacceptable in healthcare. So you need to have AI that is much more auditable, much more accountable. You need to know the sensitivity, specificity of every finding that you flag on the screen, because this is high-stakes situation. So I think there's a lot of people say, the big tech company will do this. I say they should do this. It's a big problem. We all have a hand to play, but you need to come with the right respect for the field, that this is not something that you can move fast and break things. This is not something that you can disrupt.
Indeed.
This is something that you need to run big clinical trial or big clinical study if you're going to make a claim that AI can detect cancer.
What do you think is the biggest threat to AI's success in healthcare? And I guess by success, I mean widespread adoption, widespread use, everyone's life being easier, workforce much happier, all the benefits that we could be promised with a true post-AI world. What do you think is the biggest threat? Do you think it is like a big mistake and loss of confidence and that side of things? Do you think that's the biggest threat, or do you think it's a different threat?
Working in healthcare, we know that there's no such thing as 100%. Right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be things that are not going well. Every machines in the hospital has something that potentially can go wrong on those machines today. You don't need to wait for AI to introduce risk of things not going well in healthcare. So I don't think that is the risk. I think the biggest risk is that, is AI delivering on its promise? Are we going to inundate clinicians who are super busy and super stressed already with 100 narrow tools, with 100 spell checkers? Or are we going to supply things that truly seamlessly integrate into a workflow and deliver on the promise? Because you can hype it up, right? You say this thing going to save you, help you, and you don't deliver on that promise. People are going to crash. People are going to stop engaging with you. And then the whole industry is going to get into what they call the trough of disillusionment, right? People are going to tune out because, and there was a period when we go to hospital and say we supply AI, and they say, I heard before about AI, it doesn't work. It just pick up pneumothorax.
Interesting.
It's just picking up one or two things. I'm too busy for you. Go away. And it took us a long time to show that our product is more comprehensive, because people don't believe that possible could be done. So I think the biggest risk is people overhyping the benefit before they actually useful tool and deliver on the promise.
Yeah, because there's two sides to not living up to promise. It's either overhyped or underdelivered or both. And I think that's really interesting. Because what you're talking about, actually, you're talking about living up to its promise to the users, because what you're saying is this actually lives or dies on whether the users feel benefit, i.e. healthcare professionals. Does this actually live up to the promise of this will make your day easier to a jobbing cardiologist or nurse practitioner on a respiratory ward or whoever it is? That's what you're saying. So which I can completely understand. I've been there. I remember when I was an anaesthetist, or junior anaesthetist, training anaesthetist, our clinical director brought in this trialed this system. We give a lot of drugs in anesthetics, right? We give a lot of drugs, I imagine there's some difficulty with like inventory and like logging which patient has had what, if they have a reaction or like So like, okay, maybe a bit more governance or a bit more kind of informational data around like what drugs are going into whom and whatever is a bit useful. Anyway, trialed this system. You put stickers on all the drugs. We have so many drugs that look the same. You put stickers on them, right? In anesthetics, I'm sure you know. Different colors. They have the drug name on it and blah, blah, blah. Brought in a new system where all the stickers had barcodes, and you would put this. I can't remember now. I think you put the sticker with the barcode on the syringe as you normally would, but then you'd need to get this thing and then scan it, and then that would then link to a system which would do maybe inventory. It would maybe do like electronic patient record stuff. Not that we had electronic patient records, so I'm not really sure like what the benefit was there. But anyways, it was doing something. But this just interfered with just the natural flow of how anaesthetists do things. And I'm sure anaesthetists that are listening won't mind me saying that, you know, everyone's got their way of doing things and a relatively particular bunch, because you've got to get a lot done. You've got to get a lot done in a very systematized way. This just goes in the middle and just puts a roadblock through it of like, now you've got to think about these other things. You've got to think about this barcode scanner. You've got to scan the thing, these extra steps, and like, what? I mean, no prizes for guessing this did not last. It fell flat on its face and it did not get adopted, because at the end of the day, no matter what financial benefit was being seen at the other end, you interrupted with the natural order of things on the clinical ground floor. You cannot interrupt the natural order of things on the clinical ground floor, because at the end of the day, those individual clinicians care about nothing in that moment other than the safety of their patient and just optimizing their healthcare as much as possible. That's all they care about. And actually, they're not going to sacrifice anything for the quality of care for their patients in that moment. So like, do I care that I did not scan a barcode? No, I do not. So like, I just don't care. Do I care that saved the hospital £500,000 per quarter? Don't care. Like, it's just not going to work, because at the end of the day, if I'm scanning a barcode, I'm not checking their oxygen sats. And if that's the 5 seconds where a problem starts and the tube's not in the right place or something, whatever it is, like, I'm not taking that risk, I'm afraid. So like, you can employ someone to come and do that and do it around me if you want. Even then, I'm going to cause a bit of a scene, but end of the day. But anyway, the reason I tell that story is because like, I think that innately you clearly understand that. Innately that you clearly understand that at the end of the day, if things don't work in the clinical ground floor, it's just not going to work. And it's so healthy to just have that respect for what happens at the clinical coalface, because ultimately, like, I mean, you said it, you see that as the biggest threat to AI success. I think you're right. Like, I really do. I think you're right. If entrepreneurs and health tech companies cannot understand this, they will not succeed, I don't think, because at the end of the day, any innovation, and bear in mind, like, when I was doing quality improvement projects, which is how I sort of like made my name. I didn't make my name in medicine in any way, shape or form, but I guess sort of put me on the map of like innovation, or put innovation on the map for me, I should say, was actually doing these little quality improvement projects. But even when I was doing clinical, like quality improvement projects, like as a junior doctor, I'd have to work incredibly hard to convince the physios or the OTs or the nurses that this change of the anesthetic chart was a good idea, because it's not just me that looks at it. Like, it's everyone that looks at it. And actually, yeah, okay, I'm writing in it for the lion's share of the thing, but the nurses look at it in recovery. If I make a change to the anesthetic chart, it's not where they like it, because it's perfect for them in recovery. So if I change it so even clinicians have to work really hard for other clinicians, let alone, you know, the suits in inverted commas coming in and telling them to do stuff. But yeah, it's so healthy, mate. So healthy to have that respect.
I love this story. Actually, this is where you and I have a common starting point. So even before starting this AI company, my first startup is actually a social enterprise. So when I worked in Ramsey Healthcare, I was this, you know, private hospital, nice hospital. And whenever I went back to Vietnam for volunteer, you know, it's all public hospital, incredibly crowded, you know, people everywhere, things are everywhere. And I recently, at a time, like start reading up on the thing called lean healthcare. And you probably know the concept, you know, about putting things in place, like 5S, you know, everything in the right place, you know, sorting it, putting in the right place. So I started a social enterprise with a few doctors in Vietnam, incredible people. And we just go hospital to hospital doing Marie Kondo, which essentially just throw out all the trash, reorganize everything. And just like drugs that look alike and sound alike should not be next to each other. Very basic things. The charge, discharge, and I call it the low tech in healthcare innovation. But it completely work. Right? It is healthcare improvement. This is how basic things get done well will save patients, avoid medical error. People are not given the wrong drugs. People are not having the wrong part of their body cut off. It's just basic things. So I think that's just really, and that team is doing incredible work today. I'm continuing to support them. So I like to think that I'm doing both high tech and low tech innovation in a moment. And I'm pretty sure the low tech part actually is more impactful still because of the number of hospitals that has been transformed through something very basic, which is just reorganizing the workflow. So I think healthcare, like you say, you need to really understand the environment that you bring your intervention, being a new drug, then a barcode or an AI technology into, and have appreciation of that. So I have the same, epiphany when I was in that conference in 2019, just walking in and say, this is just a lot of tech founders who never worked in hospital before, thinking that the AI for pneumothorax is going to sell. I just like, no, you're going to interfere with everyone's work and people are not going to be very happy and not going to pay you. So it's just, we still have a lot to tackle. I think that the concept of a machine-human interface in healthcare going to be a rich area for research as we're bringing in another voice, right? It used to be the nurse, the doctors, and now you have an AI having a voice in the patient care. So I think there's going to be a lot of adjustment in the next few decades, even for healthcare to adjust to this new intelligence that we bring into around the table.
It's fascinating, isn't it, mate? And actually, you know what? It's really nice that you can talk so freely about actually sometimes the low tech stuff works a bit better, actually gets better results, because also low tech is also low cost. And low cost is a lot easier to get adopted, and you don't have to do a business case. You don't have to have a meeting with the finance directors, and a lot of this stuff like works a bit easier. I can remember just even health tech companies, like on my journey through health tech from the early days, all sorts of weird and wonderful ways to drop, do not attend rates of like people that don't attend appointments, and then all of a sudden there's a company that comes along that just like sends an SMS text to them like a day before and just reminds them, and all of a sudden the DNRs drop by DNAs drop by like 30% or something just from like sending them one text message. It's like it's funny how like sometimes the actual solution doesn't need to be particularly techy, but I think what that actually speaks to is simplicity, and I think actually that's what it's got to be the end goal, hasn't it? Simplicity. It's got to be the end goal for the user. It's got to be the end goal. And I think sometimes like where things are actually the best, that they probably are highly technical, like Harrison, like Annalise, like Franklin, like they're highly technical under the hood and increasing complexity since the IVF. Even the IVF days was pretty complex. And then you added more complexity. But I think it's that thing you've kept it simple for the users. You've kept it simple for the customers. You've kept and that the greatest amount of complexity can often go into making it look and feel and seem simple. But yeah, whether it's high tech, whether it's low tech, I think simplicity can apply across both, particularly where it comes to the users and the customers. It sounds like, well, you are doing incredible work, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. If anybody wants to learn more about Harrison, Annalise, Franklin, or indeed if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. So the best way to send me a message on LinkedIn if you want to contact me directly. Otherwise, our company website have a lot of video podcasts that we do just to share about our work, but also you can hear from our teams. We're growing all the time. So there's a long list of positions that we recruit globally. So please come and join us. This is going to be a fascinating journey for the next a few decades at least. So very excited.
It is, mate. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Thank you for your time, James.